Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is the fall quarter for MSP Tech Talk, powered by SMB Nation. It's post-election day, so I think everybody got their political wonk fixed last night. It's time to get back to work. We're talking IoT for MSPs today. Pretty popular topic. So we'll go around the horn a little bit later, but we're joined by some experts today. So myself, if we haven't met Harry Brailsford, we'll have Frank, Mike, Satish, and Tony pitching in on some conversations. A little bit of housekeeping on the agenda side, so be sure to use the questions feature to ask your questions. Jennifer Hallmark over in the radio control room will read those off. I always like to kind of make mention of either where I'm at or where I'm headed. So yesterday was the Channel Pro SMB Forum in Long Beach, California, where I still am. I'm headed up to Cal Poly for a few days, an engineering college up in San Luis Obispo, then back to Seattle to do laundry, and off to Las Vegas for the Cisco Partner Conference next week. Let me know if you will be at the Cisco Partner Conference and we can get together. With that said, we're going to talk about the Internet of Things, some IoT factoids, the Small Business Saturday contest that we're pretty proud of, and then have some examples from some emerging vendors and ISVs in the IoT space. And these are early days, so pretty excited, especially about the back part of the presentation. So let's jump right into it. The Internet of Things, on the left, yes, I copy and pasted from Wikipedia, but you would be surprised how everybody is conjuring up a definition of what the Internet of Things means, IoT. So network physical devices embedded with electronic software sensors with connectivity that enables these things to connect, collect, and exchange data. You're going to see that maps very closely to a 4-point conversation in a moment. That's the Wikipedia definition. Now, on the right is Joshua Lieberman. Yesterday at the SMB Channel Pro SMB Forum in Long Beach, I had a chance to interview him on security, and he coined the term, and I borrowed it, the idiot of things. I made it a little Southern style. And he had an example of rogue devices that can be attached to a network. And he actually did have a refrigerator example in his walk of life where it was streaming out unknown packets. And that's one of the risks of the idiot of things. Great term. I hope he gets a service mark. I'll take the Southern version. With that said, we're going to make this presentation as interactive as possible. So this is an executive from Ingram Micro that I interviewed last week at Ingram One in the IoT Pavilion. And I want to go ahead and play that for you because that sets the table for more definition conversations. So Jenny, if you could cue that up. And Jenny, do they need to be able to listen to the computer speakers, or can they also hear via phone?
They should be able to hear both ways, but I always recommend go on computer speakers.
All righty, well, let's see if we can do it. I taped it especially for this presentation today. All right, we're back. And Jenny, confirm you can see my screen?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thanks, folks, for letting me set the table with that interview that I filmed last week for the purposes of this webinar with Mike Hembry and Ingram in Washington, D.C., Ingram 1. So quickly, your typical infographic that shows the growth of the sector. What's important here, the infographic explains itself, 20 billion devices by 2020, up to significant growth over the next few years from 3.1 billion to 11.2 billion in consulting services. These infographics should always be taken with a grain of salt, because if you took all the infographics from all the research houses on all the sectors, it would actually exceed the world's gross domestic product. So factor that in as you kind of manage your expectations. But this is an area of hope for MSPs in a transitory market where server side is essentially gone. And in fact, OEMs are now rebranding themselves for the IoT space. Microsoft, the Microsoft OEM division, which would have historically been known for desktops and servers, is now fond of referring it to itself as IoT out of building 122 in Redmond. So again, I'll get you the deck. I'll let these growth figures speak for themselves. So IoT Factoids. So what Hembry was saying was only a 2% success rate past proof of concept in the IoT space for channel partners. So that, hopefully you're viewing that as a green field, and you're viewing it as, we don't know sometimes how this stuff works. Think of ArcNet. If we go all the way back to ArcNet in the 80s, where you actually had to set the dip switches to give each network node a unique identity, and is right in the token ring era. That's what it feels like. And you remember the failure that you would have with ArcNet, stringing the barrel connectors and the coaxial cable. So that's why that number would be low. To me, it represents opportunity. Hembry also went on to say it's a business sale. So we're there for a business purpose, or don't bother. The elements were the sensors. So an example, the 4 elements he quoted were sensors. An example of the sensor is RFID, where you can lay very low-cost sensors down on supplies, say pharmaceutical supplies, to eliminate theft and transport, the gateway, the connectivity, and the cloud, the cloud where we'd have dashboards to aggregate it all. Now, here's the good news. The vendors I've invited on today, community vendors early in the game, fit respectively into a few of these boxes. And that's why I brought them on. They were at the Ingram 1 conference in Washington, D.C. in the IoT Pavilion that you saw in the background. So personally, I think we have hand in glove going on with today's presentation. And then a shout out to the elephant in the room, IoT security. That will be its own topic in winter quarters. So that's a 90-minute topic, but it is the elephant in the room. And they're kind of a cross between an ISV and an OEM. Fortinet, longtime community sponsor of the MSP Tech Talk series. And you'll hear from them starting in winter quarter a little bit more. We're going to get them back, but they are investing heavily in the IoT security area, because if we go back to the idiot of things slide at the beginning, where you have a rogue refrigerator transmitting packets, that's what we're talking about. Now, understand, this is a work in progress. And reflecting that, it will be a topic, winter quarter, IoT security. Today is sort of IoT 101. Early days. So what I wanted to show here, a little bit of storytelling, is that on the left, you have the Seattle Times. And what we used to do in the late 80s and early 90s, and I know I'm dating myself, but I was on the Microsoft Excel 3.0 team as a software tester in the original Pentagon of buildings in Microsoft Redmond. Microsoft had just crossed 5,000 employees and just had its first billion-dollar quarter, I believe it was. Might have been billion-dollar year. And so it was really early days. I think I was in building 8, something that those are being torn down and rebuilt. But here's my point. I want to give you context. What we used to do was get the Seattle Times Sunday paper, and we would look at the classified job ads in the Sunday paper, and this was the physical newspaper, and we'd literally tape them on the wall. And it wasn't even my division. I just kind of got off on what this team was doing. The team was Visual Basic, if you remember the early releases of Visual Basic. And the way we could validate, today we call it analytics, but back then we're trying to validate what was the uptick in Visual Basic. And the way we could do that was track the number of job ads in a Sunday paper for Visual Basic. And we literally took those pages and taped them up on the wall. And it was both analytics and it was also excitement. So we were trying to build excitement for the team to know that the work they did mattered. And you can do that today. Now, it's a little bit wonky today, so this research kind of falls down. Because if you go to a newspaper, and newspapers are not what they were back in the late 80s, early 90s. If you go to a newspaper, first of all, the job ads have shrunk. There's been a huge transformation in how jobs are advertised. And so as you can see, the Seattle Times job site is being powered by Indeed. But it is kind of cool to see the uptick in IoT, and this is something theoretically you could track. Again, I don't think it's as solid or predictive as it was back in the print ad days where there was a real cost advertising, and it just felt, I don't know, felt better. Anyone can slap up an ad here, but if you look at these ads today, basically you're seeing IoT advertised at what I would call the OEM level, so things like Qualcomm and the chip makers. Frank, I don't know if you want to come on and maybe talk about that, because you spent a career at Intel, and you could, Intel being a big chip maker, maybe before your departure, I don't know if you're able to comment on the IoT-isms out at Intel and the recruiting that was going on in the transformation of Intel. Feel free to pitch in, sir. I want to call out on a couple of my committee members as we fly by. We'll catch Frank on the rebound. And then on the right, another friend of the family, Cynics, who's been a big supporter of the MST Tech Talk series. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a Thursday down in the Bay Area, a one-day IoT event with Cynics and Microsoft, and this is well-known community member Rob Moyer talking, that's him on stage, talking about IoT at a one-day, and that's another thing we can track. Okay, so on my left, you have job ads to validate the opportunity. On my right, you have conference content, and that's something we measure. If something comes into the mainstream, conferences always like to be about a step ahead. Sometimes they're a little bit too far ahead to be relevant, but we like them to be one step ahead and not a step behind. So you're seeing more content start to emerge in IoT that's actionable. And again, shout out to Rob Moyer, longtime Microsoft Blue Badge, who went over to Cynics and friend of the SMB Nation. Want to talk for a second and show just another quick vid. This is our sponsor moment. We rely on our sponsors to help us stay on the air. And we have a Small Business Saturday contest. So Jenny, if you want to run the vid that I did on the Small Business Saturday contest, then I'll tell people how to join. All right, and we're back. Thank you, Jenny, folks. So very easy. Go to smbnation.com, click on the Small Business Saturday logo, and join us for Small Business Saturday on November 24th, as well as the chance to win a $1,000 prepaid Amex card. Not quite Powerball lottery. Folks, I was double checking my notes. I want to circle back to something in the Hembry interview. And if you go to handouts over on your control panel for GoToWebinar, so my right on the screen, go to your handouts, and I have the IoT, basically an IoT playbook from Ingram Micro that you can download and read and leverage. With that said, Jenny, am I back on the screen with the deck?
You are.
All right, let's keep moving. Another IoT factoid, folks. I had an interview that's also a video. We're not going to play it for you, so you have to go to the SMB Nation channel on YouTube. But if you want to catch my, it's actually a podcast with Robert Stevens, the founder of Geek Squad in Minneapolis, who now has exited Best Buy after the acquisition and leads a very nice life. He'll talk about the topic of IoT, and in particular, shout out to a firm called Augury. So they install sensors in industrial machines, and that's a lot of what we think of as IoT today. And you saw the Wikipedia definition at the beginning of this webinar about manufacturing, a tip of the hat to manufacturing. That is true. What I like about Augury, having been turned on to it by Robert Stevens, is it measures sound waves and sound deviates. And so the simple example is my blue Volvo station wagon that I bought back in the early days of SBS. Rode that thing through raising two boys, got them out the door to college. So there are some miles on that car, and rode it through a recession and a fender bender up at a ski resort. I can tell when I get in that blue Volvo and it is literally on its last legs, and I'm going to donate it to the people who drive blind, doesn't really have any book value. But I can tell when I turn the key to start that car by listening if I'm having a good Volvo day or not. And that's what Augury does, is it takes it and it digitizes the analog sound waves and then monitors that and then notifies what would be in most cases an IT pro, but it could certainly be an MSP, but it would send you an alert if in the analog sound wave, there's a variation of a noise that a piece of equipment makes that exceeds a threshold, and you're gonna get an alert and then you're gonna go check it out. And again, we already do that as human beings. I liken it to the way I used to explain big data. It's a little bit off color, but big data and predictive lead scoring, I said, we've always done it. We've always done predictive lead scoring. Just go to match.com. And that's basically what people are doing, is they're scoring the attributes and qualities of a potential partner. So by analogy, we've always used sound to manage our equipment, and all they've done at Augury is take it to the next level. Stevens goes on to say that, the IoT opportunity translates to bullet point number 2, I will not say, with women and children on the webinar. And he says sensors are like Sajam for industrial clients. And so it's a green field of opportunity at the sensor level. I'm going to get to RMM in a minute, next slide. But the future, as he sees it, is not automation, but anticipation. Now, look at how that ties to, let's go back. Right here, bullet point number 3 from Hembry over at Ingram should be disruptive to the status quo from reactive conditions to proactive conditions. Bullet point number 3, relate that to bullet point number 3. I'm sorry, bullet point number 4, sub 1, not automation, anticipation. So you have thought leaders in the emerging field of IoT where we're still developing the paradigms, and they're starting to tell the same story It's akin to the Microsoft ad that, hey, Windows 7 was my idea, where at a certain point in time, we have a confluence of like thinking. People do like to think it was their idea, but smart minds often think the same way at the same time. So Stevens concluded a natural act would be monitoring. So you would think the RMM people would be all over IoT, but here's the problem with that. Gaskin wrote over in Channel Pro magazine, James Gaskin out of Dallas, we're not ready. The tools aren't ready. And it's quite a good article if you want to Google that, James Gaskin, IoT, Channel Pro, SMB. Feel free to read it, but he comes up with some things you can do while we're waiting for the RMM manufacturers, the ISVs, to become IoT experts. Number one, do a site assessment. Two, run Delta reports to identify what new devices show up. So Sentinel-1 and some other tools are really good about finding rogue refrigerators that had been plugged into your network. Go ahead and use the existing RMM tools as you're able, QBR, and then better control on the network. And there he's actually quoting Dave Seibert, community member over at SMB Tech Fest. With that said, Frank, we're going to tee you up, and we're going to tee you up with a quick video interview, again, recently at the Ingram One conference in Washington, D.C., just before Halloween. So, Jenny, while Frank gets queued up, let's run the interview, and then we'll have Frank tell his story for real. All righty, we're back. Frank, before I bring you on and answer that last question, I'm going to let you answer all the questions. And folks, be sure to use the questions feature, especially with this next segment with the vendors that I brought on to talk about their IoT solutions. So, Frank, hopefully I made your job a little bit easier today by setting the table with that video. I know it always takes me 2 or 3 times to hear something to learn. I believe we have some slides while we're bringing those up. Where are you today, sir?
I'm down in actually my home office in Portland, Oregon. So it's cloudy and not rainy day, but at least cloudy right now. So we're actually moving my son into his first real apartment. So I've just been busy this morning.
There we go. Well, sir, take it from the top. I have your slide up on mass adoption.
So so thanks, Harry, and thanks SMB Nation for allowing me to participate here. We talked about in the video sort of the basics and at least of the Chargify solution, and I'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. But what I wanted to kind of emphasize really from a oh, you know what, Harry, I think it might be on a slideshow mode. Maybe go back to the first slide there.
Yeah, I think we're on a timer. Sir, I have wireless charging is about mass adoption.
Yeah, so we'll stay
there. Try to keep it there.
So
okay, I'll keep going back. So we're at mass adoption with your scale.
Yeah, I'll let you know when to go. So before we even kind of go into this the message here, what I really kind of wanted to emphasize and play on was Eric, the video with Eric Embry from Ingram as well, and his key point, which was you know, the IoT is, you know, just has this, you know, because it's everything and the Internet of Things, it's got, you know, you can add digital signage. It's just really a complicated element and a too broad of a term. But and one of the things that we found with Chargify is that because it's an additive to your MSP, your managed services, as that, you know, kind of pointed out in the video, that, you know, a lot of different IoT solutions don't need to be so, you know, big hairy goal. They need to be, you know, additive to your current business, and that's really what Chargify is sort of enabling with one particular solution. So in this first slide here, this is again some data just on the adoption of wireless charging within devices and particularly phones to start with, but that will not be the end. The same technology that's been standardized once Apple released the 8 Plus and the 8 and the 10X a year plus ago, they adopted the Qi standard, which is spelled QI, pronounced Qi. That standard became, you know, there was a competing standard, but when Apple chose Qi, then it was kind of game over. And so there's a, you know, the last 3 generations of Samsung devices, the last 2 generations now of Apple, and going forward, you can, I mean, any phone that's been announced in the last 9 or 10 months, if it doesn't have the Qi standard on it, it's not a well accepted product, and it's going to get slammed in the reviews. So the need, so that's kind of the basics in terms of the devices, and there's numbers from, you know, hundreds of millions to, you know, beyond. But the key part on the right, which is really kind of the opportunity for an MSP, is to look at where the charging is going to happen, and that's kind of what we help manage with Chargify. The public spaces, and again, this is actually a faster adoption than Wi-Fi was when Wi-Fi came out 10, 15 years ago. The adoption of wireless charging in public places and the interest to put it into public places is growing and is at a faster pace than Wi-Fi was. So there's a huge opportunity, and if you look at you know, if you do an Amazon search for wireless charging devices, you'll literally come up with hundreds of pages of products, anywhere from $12 to, you know, $80 or $90 from just a consumer version that you can put on your nightstand, maybe on your office desk. But they're all just not connected. They're all standalone. There's no management. There's no eyesight onto those devices. So go ahead to the next slide, Sarah and Harry, and I'll show you a little bit what we're doing here. So what we've enabled with the Chargify, so in addition to the wireless charging the transmitter. Actually, I could have shown show and tell. I don't have one right here handy. But in addition to the show and tell, I mean, in addition to the transmitter, we have a unit called the Neutron. It's an external communications module that is connected to the Wi-Fi in an establishment. It's quickly and easily sort of tracking data and usage data at a minimum. And so that's kind of what the basics of what you get when you buy our hardware solution, and the MSP can set that up for you, or you can, you as an MSP on the audience here sets it up for your customer. The second part, which is where the real sort of value and the management and the monitoring come into play, which is obviously a key MSP deliverable, is what we deliver with the Chargerify Manage section. And this is a subscription product that you, again, buy from Ingram. And actually, all these products are exclusively distributed via Ingram in the US and Canada. So from the setup, so because you really want to micro locate, because again, I think I said it in the video, the issue is if let's call out Pete's Coffee Shop, if they've got 50 or 100 in a city, one device goes down, they're not going to know until somebody complains it to the barista, and then that's just starting a unpleasant customer engagement or experience. So what we're able to do is to be able to identify it's spot 3 on table 1 in Pete's Coffee on the corner of 5th and Salmon in Portland versus anywhere else. So we can micro-locate to that device. And then, again, as part of the MSP services, you're getting an alert if that device is down. So now you're able to say, hey, Pete's Coffee Manager, number 22, store number 22, you can call them up and just make sure it's plugged in or see whatever else might be going on. And then you can also do some fixing down through the wire. So that's the MSP opportunity right there, is to manage these devices.
Frank, if you don't mind, I have an example that was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago when we did the rehearsal for this webinar. You may recall I was at Chicago O'Hare Airport with about a 3-4 hour layover to fly down here to Southern California, and I went to, how airports are starting to put together those, I call them millennial tables, but the long, I mean, in the old days, they were workbenches in your garage, right, where you put tools. But they have the millennial tables. And I literally was at one of those as we were going through the rehearsal, and thank you for accommodating the background noise. But after that, and all these people, we dutifully plugged into the little mounted electrical receptacles. Your expectation was, well, I'm going to charge my phone and I'm going to be on battery power with my laptop while I'm here. And do you know, Frank, the 3 tables that were set up there, while they had the appearance of providing power, and everybody got duped. It wasn't until later that I looked down and my phone was still like on 13%. And the power had either not been plugged into the bench table, or the table had failed. So to your point about an unpleasant customer experience, and it was ridiculous as to how many of us got duped, thinking we were charged. Frank, why would you triple check your charging once you plug in? You just assume, right? I mean, it's an easy thing to do, and most of us do that. So that's a great example of an application, right? So whether it's an airport, or it could be a doctor's office, or an ER room, or in a hotel lobby, or meeting spaces. That's where these things need to be always on, right? I mean, again, think about the Wi-Fi. If you're, what's the first call you get? Or you're going to be the first call to receive if there's something down in a particular venue, and it's the same case here. So we're really trying to make sure that the venue's experience with this is top notch and always on and always ready to be delivered. So that's sort of the second phase, and then and again, there's data in terms of usage here. This is all included in this phase here, where this is the MSP's service, and again, there's data, and this kind of comes back to why this is an IoT play. It's the edge device, it's tracking data, it's usage data that can be mixed in. It could be
managed up against sort of point of sale data from a restaurant or from a bar location, right? We've had cases where and they were able to track this via the matching of the usage data to the POS, was that somebody sitting at a bar charging their phone bought up to 50% more while they were there because they were charging their phone. They're going to stay a little longer. They're going to dwell. Their dwell time increased because of this. And so the restaurant, the revenue is getting ROI from that standpoint. Yeah. There's also an opportunity from a sponsorship and ad revenue. You could put a little ring around a spot and advertise a Corona beer, for example, and now you can go back to Corona and say, hey, you had 62 impressions last week, an average of 13 minutes. That's worth X dollars. So there's a way to monetize that for the partners and for the venues that you're selling to. The third piece, which is really kind of an interesting, lot more complicated and probably outside of most MSPs realm, is a opportunity to have to load up extra SDKs that we've produced into a mobile app. So think of a loyalty app or rewards app that is that's available with this. So you can gate the power, you can provide, you can know more of the end user participating, know more of their data and all that. So that's a critical piece. It's a little more complicated than what we can go into today, but these slides I'm sure will be available and contact information afterwards. So anybody's interested to learn more, I'd be happy to do that. So go to the next slide, Sarah, or last slide.
Yeah, hold on, Frank. And I think we had an ism with timers. So folks, forgive me for showing in PowerPoint mode, edit view, but I just wanted to make sure we could do it. Okay, Frank, we're there.
Okay, so actually it's not showing the right one. The next one, Harry.
That's a pink slide.
Yeah, there you go.
The adoption slide. Frank, this is the this
yeah,
one I have.
Yeah, this is it. This is the one. Actually, so, and again, this will be, I apologize, I thought I'd taken off the timing slideshow, but this goes into, again, when you look at when you get the presentation or download in the resources as the resources file, you'll see a little bit more in here. But really what we're kind of trying to illustrate is because, again, an IoT edge device, data analytics, there's sort of two processes here. There's a transactional data that we're collecting, and then there's behavioral, where they're moving to, what they're doing, what they're transacting with. And so, again, that data collection and aggregation is a really critical piece. And again, it's more detailed than we have time to go into today, but just wanted to make this available to get people interested in thinking about how, a solution like from Chargify is a smart platform to enable, again, it's a first step for many people. This could be an easy first step into the IoT space. To say you're an IoT provider by providing managed wireless charging is it's an easy add-on to your business. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, well, and a couple of things. First of all, there's no letter U in the word behavioral.
Well, there might be. This is a British company, so maybe that's the British spelling. Sorry.
I couldn't resist. The other thing is just the talk you and I had. So I have the Moto phone from Lenovo that I'm showing on the screen with the mods. And the way it works with Lenovo, and I don't have the sleeve, this would be a mod or a sleeve, but they have the sleeve that takes an older phone and you would put the sleeve on it. It's actually the same thickness, looks very similar to this. And you would put the sleeve on, and then I would put it on your device, and that's how they're handling an older phone. So right, I thought that was, I thought that was pretty cool. And then I want to just pivot off.
There's a bunch of other cases. There's a bunch of cases for older iPhones and other as well. That goes back to these hundreds of products that are available on Amazon. You can look for and all that. One last point I will just make, since I wanted to do a little bit of show and tell. So in this is the underside, what would be underneath the table. So this here is the transmitter, and again, on the front side of a table, you would have just a sticker to know where to put your phone. But the guts of it really is the transmitter, which is connected to this communications module, which is really what's, connects to the Wi-Fi. It's tracking the data, it's transmitting it up. You as the MSP can manage the device via this thing here with updates with iOS, and you're getting real-time updates, whether it's on, what kind of usage there is, and all that data. So again, this is a little bit more complicated design than just installing an access point. We need to look at survey furnitures and other materials where it's going to go, but again, pretty straightforward if you look at it. So I just wanted to do a quick show and tell.
Yeah, and then Jenny, I see we have at least one question queued up, but because I'm the presenter, it's not as easy for me to read the questions. Jenny, can I bring you back on and let's answer either one or more questions?
Sure. How do you ensure that IoT applications like Chargify are not using the Bluetooth or network ID of the device to track where people are traveling when they use this type of device? As a consumer, I would be very weary of this type of tracking occurring without my knowledge. Is there any industry bodies or government bodies that are going to be monitoring the hidden use of data that vendors could be collecting?
I don't know the last part of that. I don't know the answer to the last part, but I know in terms of what we're tracking, and again, Harry, if you go up one slide, I can show from what we're enabling. In the first, well, from a Chargify, from our data points and our servers and all the rest of that, we're tracking 0 personal identifiable information. The only kind of tracking really happens is in the third leg over here, what I talked about, which is the monetize, when the SDK is put into the app and the individual has opted in to be tracked or be, he's allowing the application to work on his phone, and then the venue, the restaurant or the bar or the hotel, they're taking advantage and tracking that user at that point. Up to then, Chargify is just enabling that communication. We're not providing that communication, and we're not tracking any information. Essentially, the most we ever do is if somebody does have the app installed, a loyalty app as an example, we'll track that it's a device number. We identify it as iPhone 1234, but we don't know who that is or where it is. We just know that's so in case it does come back, then the venue has the information. So hopefully that answered the question, but come back and help or clarify if I didn't.
That's all the questions I currently have.
It looks like the deck is clear for questions, but folks, do ask the questions that you have. And Frank, when you talked about early days, and then we're going to bring up Freewave in a minute, but when you talked about early days and I go back to we're still developing the paradigm, but I just can't help but some of the things you're kind of doing. I mean, folks, some of you on the line, kids wouldn't get it, but do you remember early days on the desktop? We had TSR programs like Sidekick that would do interesting and cool things. And was Sidekick going to be a staple of any computer guy or gal's practice and what you do? No, it was additive. And I don't know, Frank, why my crazy mind is flashing on that, but we're at that stage. You know what I mean? We're developing what this is going to be.
Yeah. Well, and what's really kind of interesting if you look at a longer term perspective, right? The patents and the management tools that Chargify has enabled here apply up the chain of products to tablets and PCs. Dell's got at least 1 or 2 notebooks out. Others will be coming that'll have the same Qi standard. So they could take their device to this same charging pad that you're putting your phone on and be charging their notebook without any cables. It also will apply up to drones, right? So think about Amazon trying to deliver packages. When they go to a spot to charge, they need to make sure that spot is recharged, right? So the same analysis can be used for that, and even take it all the way to electric cars. Going into a Marriott hotel, you could be assigned a specific spot, and when you turn on your app and you go to that spot, the floor charging capability will be in there, so the car doesn't have to plug in at all either. So all those are sort of really far-reaching technologies, or maybe not so far, but they're out there, in the future, and the same management tools that we've got here will apply up the chain.
And Frank, unrelated question before I let you go is, with your time at Intel, did you feel you had a front row seat? It might have been the wrong department, wrong building on the farm out there in Hillsboro, but did you feel you had a front row seat into Intel's transformation into IoT-isms as a chip maker?
Well, yeah, and again, kind of I was talking a little bit earlier. You know, part of the explosion of IoT was really kind of a collection of things. I mean, digital signage was, you know, established and been around. Digital security and surveillance has been, you know, technologies and products available. Intel kind of put them in. They didn't have a home individually, so they kind of went into this. Again, call it a big umbrella of IoT, and so yeah, that transformation is, you know, kind of what's complicated things, because everything, I mean, it wasn't just Internet of Things, it was Internet of everything. And so, you know, if it didn't have a home and a client as traditional client, it was put into an IoT, and that's so. You know, there is an IoT group now at Intel that drives these different types of technologies and products, and, you know, trying to make sure that they work together with the fundamental infrastructure. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. It was always fascinating to see what was coming down the line, you know, months and years ahead.
All right, so folks, thank you, Frank, and chargerfly.com, folks. Let us move on, but before we do that, let me just once again give perspective as to what today is about. It's MSP Tech Talk, it's fall quarter, we're basically at midterms, and we're talking about IoT. And the reason I have vendors on, and as you know, we're very strict with our format. We consider it an academic format that's generously underwritten by sponsors and vendors, but this is so darn new that I have to go. It's a necessary evil, Frank. I have to go out to the vendor community to get my data points. It's a lot like it's a lot like some early work we did with voice over IP, and doggone it, we had to go to Cisco, right? I mean, we had to go to their scientists and their subject matter experts to be able to even talk about the darn stuff. But thank you, Frank. Let me go back to screen mode. Let's see if we can make that work. And I believe we have Greg and Mike out there from Freewave. Gentlemen, introduce yourself. Where are you today? And let's get this IoT party started.
Thanks, Harry. My name is Mike Canizero. I am with Freewave. We're a company based out of Boulder, Colorado. And I'm at my home office today, and I apologize, my desktop does not have a video camera, so I won't be joining you visually, but I was in the background to Eric Embry's left when Harry was talking to him, so maybe when you get this deck, you can look for me there. I also have on the line Greg Corey. He's one of our system engineers, and Freewave is an industrial IoT company. We have been in business for 25 years doing network communication and connectivity for sensors in industrial remote environments. And as the IIoT moniker has gained traction, obviously, you know, we have to jump on board and start using that moniker, but Freewave has effectively been doing industrial Internet of Things for many years. And to give you some more background on all of that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg, let him introduce himself, and go through some of these slides. So thanks, Harry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Corey, and I'm a systems engineer with Freewave Technologies. As Mike noted, we're based in Boulder, Colorado, and we focus on the industrial segment of IoT. And the industrial space is different from the consumer space in that we're typically communicating over longer distances. So typically assets that are distributed over a geographic area that need to gain data connectivity to the cloud or other services like that. And also environments that may be extremely low or high temperature. So the equipment itself that's used in the industrial space has very different requirements than the consumer space. If you want to go to the next slide here, we'll talk a little bit about Freewave.
And forgive me, I think it might be on our side. We had a timer set, so I'm going to have to stay in PowerPoint edit mode. Forgive me.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So just a little background here on Freewave. We've been doing IIoT, which is the Industrial Internet of Things, for over 25 years now. We primarily work in the oil and gas sector, water, wastewater. We also do some military applications. IIoT is all about machine-to-machine data. So you may have seen that acronym before, M2M. We're not exchanging, video or VoIP or any other high bandwidth stuff. This is typically data from sensors and other operational data points, we'll say. Over time, if you want to go ahead and click to the next slide there.
Yes, sir.
So what's interesting about the industrial space and IoT is if you talk to anybody that's been in the industry for more than 15 years, they'll tell you that they have been doing this before the Internet of Things, was a marketing acronym there. So originally in the industrial sector, it was referred to as SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, which is a fancy term for monitoring and controlling processes over industrial environments there. So SCADA was the original Internet of Things, and if you're working in the oil and gas sector or water, wastewater, it typically involves, like I said, assets distributed out over a geographic area. There's RTUs out in the field, remote terminal units, programmable logic controllers, an array of sensors, and SCADA is all about how do we retrieve that data from the field over long distances in harsh environments, and how do we also control those processes. So traditionally, SCADA has been operated remotely by a set of software protocols that sends out a pole to get a piece of data from the field, and that device responds to that pole. In that traditional type of architecture, there's a couple limitations of that, in that it's somewhat slow. So you always have to ask a question to get a response. And even if the data doesn't change out in the field, you're still going to continue to ask the same questions and maybe getting the same responses, wasting time, efficiency, and bandwidth on that network. Also, there's a lot of older protocols that are not easily portable, we'll say, to modern IoT cloud solutions. So here's a diagram of what I just mentioned there, a pole response network over a large geographic area, and that was the original Internet of Things. If you want to go to
well, if you don't mind, I'll try to add value, but I worked my way through college. I'm from Alaska, and I had a summer job on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, owned by the big 7 oil companies and managed by Alaska Pipeline, and they had microwave towers. So they were doing this, right? And I don't want to say how many years ago. But we didn't even know the word internet. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But they were doing this, as you would hope, right, with the facilities up from Prudhoe Bay, 800 miles down to Valdez. I was at a couple of different pump stations in my tenure, but it was freaking cool. We just didn't know to call it IoT.
Yep, and it was cutting edge stuff back then, and that's eventually evolved into what we do with IIoT today. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned that pipeline application. For those of the listeners out there that are familiar with MQTT, Message Query Telemetry Transport, which is an IoT specific protocol, that was originally developed for a pipeline monitoring application. So a lot of what we have today in IoT actually came from the SCADA world, pipeline monitoring, asset monitoring, 20, 30 years ago now.
Yes, sir.
Yep. All right.
Next slide.
So in order to enable these advantages in connecting with modern software services, Freewave is a hardware manufacturer of long-range industrial radios. And in the last 20 years, we'll say, in the industrial radio space, this is all about getting data from hard to access locations. And in difference to microwave, you need a clear line of sight between those towers, where rolling hills or areas that are vegetated, you might not have that line of sight. So Freewave has specialized in 900 megahertz spread spectrum long distance industrial radios for maybe, not a video application going 10 or 20 miles, but maybe checking the status of a valve or a pressure sensor or something like that. So over those, the past 20 years, it's all about just been getting data in and out of the radio. For a long time, the industrial radio segment has been somewhat, similar to cell phones 10, 15 years ago now, where we only use cell phones to make calls. That's all they did. It was voice in, voice out. And now if you think about what smartphones have done to our lives, they've cannibalized so many different hardware devices that nobody has an MP3 player anymore. Everybody uses GPS navigation on their phone. We don't have a separate piece of hardware for that. For those of you that can remember Palm Pilot for taking notes, back in the 90s, everything is done on a smartphone now, and it's all about leveraging software on that hardware. So in saying that, that's the approach that Freewave is taking to the long-range industrial radio world, in that we don't just want to move data from point to point in and out of physical ports. We want to be able to interact with that data, add value, load applications onto our hardware, and make some of those decisions at the edge of the network. And we'll go to the next slide here.
Yes, sir.
So when you add an intelligent device like an IoT gateway to the edge of your network, that offers a couple benefits. As I mentioned previously, in the traditional SCADA world, you continually had to ask the same questions to get the same responses from devices in the field. And that takes a lot of time and bandwidth on the network. With an IoT gateway out there, when you have an intelligent device sitting at the edge, you can pull in data from that sensor and then publish that without being asked. So there's a smarter algorithm, only send data when this sensor is changed. And we also don't need to ask for that data anymore, because the device is intelligent enough to know when it has to send it. So that frees up time and space on these lower bandwidth networks. So when you have a connection that's 10, 20 miles through very rugged terrain, you're not going to be pushing 20, 100 meg through that type of terrain. So bandwidth is a very precious resource. And by adding intelligence at the edge, we can help preserve that and open up new applications when we're saving bandwidth there. Also, as I mentioned, the software connectivity, a lot of the protocols used in industrial processes are fairly old. They don't offer a lot of security, and it's difficult to implement those older protocols into newer software solutions. And we deal with this at Freewave when we have young, millennial software developers that are interns, and they look at an older industrial protocol and they're, hey, there's no API for this. Is this in JSON? Can I send an HTTP GET to this? And the answer is no. You can't do any of those things because it's just such an antiquated protocol. So by adding these IoT smart gateways, you can take that older industrial protocol and easily convert it to something that's shareable through many different cloud services and other IoT software packages. It makes that configuring and that pluggability a heck of a lot easier there at the edge.
Yep.
All right, go on to the next slide here. So kind of converging the two worlds here, traditional SCADA and the more modern IIoT and what that enables us to do. I think I went over a lot of the advantages so far. What this slide really emphasizes is what we're doing once we have that data. So when we're saving time in a network because we have a smart device at the edge, we're able to retrieve data faster, more efficient, and it's easily shareable across many different software services. So when you have more readily, faster available data, you can then do a whole bunch of processing on that data. You can do predictive analytics, you can do prescriptive analytics, actionable insights. I'll tell you, one of the applications I recently worked on was a wind farm in New Mexico, where they use our ZoomLink product in vibration detection sensors. So they can tell with predictive analytics if a gearbox is about to go bad in a wind turbine, so they can perform maintenance on that before they have to replace the entire part, which involves getting a crane to drop the blades on the wind turbine. I think they're 230 feet tall, so it is no small effort to do maintenance on a wind turbine. So predictive analytics, being able to detect those faults before they happen, is incredibly and extremely valuable to them. So this entire solution makes that data easily accessible and fast.
Yeah, and I think, if you don't mind, I think you're bringing together a couple of earlier points. And folks, if you joined us late, let me get to the right slide. So you're bringing together the elements. Point number 4, that should be sensors, which is an example is RFID. You're bringing together the gateway, the connectivity, and the cloud. So you brought those elements together in your conversation. And then the second point about status quo from reactive to predictive, you're bringing that together on that last slide, as well as the interview I had with Robert Stevens, founder of Geek Squad. Point number 4.1, not automation, but anticipation. So I appreciate that because, again, part of our journey here is to help establish the paradigm. We're that early.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to hit on that other slide you talked about and having a use case is we're at the point of maturity in the industry where nobody is really impressed if you can move data, from a device somewhere to the internet. I mean, pretty much everything is readily available on the internet. So the proof of concept is important, but it's more important in the business case to find a use case to solve a problem. It's if you have a nice flashy interface and can get data from somewhere, there's a lot of companies that could do that. So it's about finding your niche and what value you can add, besides getting data from anywhere. And that's what we're hoping to do by leveraging software on our platform.
Cool. Jenny, I'm going to call out to you. I think I saw a couple comments line up. One of those might have been for Frank, but Jenny, let's clear the deck. And then while we're doing that, I'm going to put up the hero slide for Freewave.
Yep, I've got another question for Frank. How would you be able to track to see if a device that had previously been there had returned if you're not tracking its Bluetooth or wireless MAC address?
Okay, that actually goes back to the third leg of the, if you will, of the stool that I was showing in terms of some basic monitoring and then the managing and the monitoring. At that point, we're not tracking anything, but the venue themselves. So let's say a Marriott hotel is doing, has loaded it into the app, and now it's personal identifiable to them, to MGM, I'm sorry, to Marriott or to any hotel or bar that's loaded the SDK into their application, into their mobile app. That's when it's tracked. Otherwise, the individual is not tracked. Hope that makes sense. Harry, that makes sense to your understanding of the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does. And Jenny, was it Bernard up in Canada was asking if there's going to be a replay? Is that who asked that question?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, and the answer is yes.
And here, I assume you have our emails and stuff at the end of the presentation here. So if people want to reach out to me directly, then I'd be happy to answer the questions.
Yeah, well, actually, the way we handle that, I do not, but the way we handle that is the thank you note that Jenny's going to send out tomorrow with the replay link. With your all's permission, we will go ahead and put those email addresses in the thank you email. How's that sound, Frank?
That's perfect. Yeah, just want to make sure people can follow up if they want to.
Yep. Okay, so with that said, folks, we've come around the top of the hour. This is your chance to ask last questions. I've got the final slide up, and while you're deciding if you have questions, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, please click over to smbnation.com and participate in our Small Business Saturday contest. And hopefully you'll be incentivized because we have a $1,000 prepaid Amex card for one lucky winner. We're lining up some other prizes for position 2, 3, 4, but that's real money as we head into the holiday season. So love to have you get involved with Small Business Saturday. It's November 24th. Over in handouts on your control panel is a Ingram Micro Playbook for IoT if you want to download that. And then speaking of IoT, boy howdy, I guess I'll probably get some IoT-isms next week at Mandalay Bay down in Las Vegas with the Cisco Partner Conference. So I'm there if anybody would like to get together. And I think the next one is Next Gen, the Channel Company's Cloud Conference, December 8th or 9th back here in Southern California. So, Jenny, any other questions lined up? I think Tom Harper has a question, but that might be more related to getting the people's emails.
Yep, we've got one more question here, or two more questions here. Excuse me. How many of the IoT vendors are going to be impacted by the tariffs that being imposed against other countries? Most IoT devices need to manufacture, but America has lost most of its manufacturing abilities.
Yeah, I'll go to the vendors. I don't know. Any opinions, gentlemen, on
I can
tariffs?
actually, this is Greg here from Freewave, and I can speak to that a little bit. We're fortunate enough that we manufacture all of our hardware in Boulder, Colorado. There might be some odds and ends of components that we need, but in terms of our overall manufacturing process, it's a made in the USA product, so that doesn't really impact us that much. And that's something we're really proud to offer as a company to our customers, to have a made in the USA product. And also, recently there's been a lot of concerns about components coming from overseas that might be compromised from a security perspective. We've seen that in the telecom world recently where there was compromised hardware installed in the US. So we think that made in the US is a viable solution, and we're executing it here, and we think it offers benefits to our customers.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Jenny, next question, please.
Can we get a link for the deck too in the email?
Yeah, well, better yet, Jenny, let's just send out the deck. I'll go ahead and PDF-ify it. Frank's got me thinking of ifying things, Chargeify, PDF-ify. I'm going to Driveify later up to Cal Poly-ify. So I'll do that, Jenny. I'll kick you over the PDF and so on. Jenny, is the deck clearer so these good people can all get back to work?
Yeah, one last comment. It looks like, well, question comment. Does that put North America at a major disadvantage? I'm not quite sure what that was supposed to go with. So
I think that's back to the tariffs, and I would say I think a lot of that's still TBD. I mean, there's where the tariffs are, what they're hitting, where it's the point of integration, kind of to the previous comment about Freewave, their products being made here, but I'm sure there's some components that are coming from China or other places. So I think it's a case by case basis on whether it's going to affect the pricing or affect availability.
Yeah, I would concur, and we pride ourselves on staying nonpartisan, but there's a reality with the election results last night to be determined, right? I mean, we live in a dynamic political world, and a lot of these are political decisions. So keep that seatbelt fast, and that's all I can say.
Yeah, I want to mention on that front that American manufacturing for electronics anyways is becoming more and more competitive with the rise in automation and automation technology. The cost of manufacturing has come way down. Wages are going up in China and Taiwan and places like that. I think it was Foxconn that recently announced that they're going to be opening a plant in Wisconsin that they can't find enough workers for currently. So I think that the ship has not sailed on American manufacturing. Freewave has been doing it ever since the company was founded for the past 25 years ago. And I know other people that are manufacturing engineers that work in the US, and with the rise of automation and the rise in labor overseas, you're going to see more manufacturing in the US.
Yep. Well, we can make that the final word, Ginny, if the deck is clear. And so, folks, we'll look forward to having you join us in the next MSP Tech Talk in 2 weeks that will relate to another blockchain lecture. So we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into blockchain. Then we knock out a couple more as we head deep into the holiday season. Before you know it, it'll be the first of the year. So thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your support. Gentlemen on the panel, thank you for taking time out of your day. And SureWeb, thank you for helping to power our Small Business Saturday contest. Folks, click over to www.smbnation.com and click the Small Business Saturday ad, and please sign up for our contest. Thanks, Jenny. Over in the control room, have a great day.
Thanks, Harry. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.